Hello, I am Andrew Rains from Troop 477 at First Presbyterian, and I have been interviewing many of the Central United Methodist Church's veterans from World War II. And here today is Mr. Bauknight.
Okay.
It's good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
So, where were you born?
Columbia, South Carolina.
What year was that?
Pardon?
What year was that?
1921.
Did you attend university?
I did for 1 year, and then I went to Clemson.
Okay. And then you were drafted or enlisted?
No, I enlisted.
Okay. And what branch did you go into?
Air Corps.
So where was boot camp at?
Boot camp was at Keesler Field, Mississippi, at Biloxi, Mississippi.
You remember any of the officials there and any of your good buddies?
I can't call their names, but I can remember some of them.
Okay. How long had the war been going on at that time? What year was that?
That was 1943. The war had been going on for about a year and a half, and I had a job in the defense industry and was getting deferred, but I was afraid I'd be drafted and end up in the infantry, which I didn't want to do. So I decided to enlist in the Air Corps.
So when did your tour begin and where?
My what?
Tour.
My tour?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was at Keesler Field for my basic training, and I enlisted to take pilot training. So while I was there, I got sick, went to the hospital, and while I was in the hospital, all my group shipped out and went to the next phase. So when I got out of the hospital, they put me with a bunch of people and said, "You'll be going pretty soon." Well, we waited and we waited. And finally they told us there's no room for more pilots right now, and we're going to send you to a radio school. So I went to Madison, Wisconsin radio school. And then we went down to Chinook Field in Rantoul, Illinois, to electronics school. Then we went down to Boca Raton, Florida for radar school. And then we were ready to go overseas.
Okay. So where did you first go off to?
They took us to in New Jersey, the port in New Jersey, I can't call the name of it. But anyway, we got on the ship at that port, and I think there were 8,000 of us on board. It was a civilian passenger liner, but they had converted it for military use. And so we were on the ocean for 10 days, zigging back and forth, to avoid submarines. And we landed in Liverpool, England. I stayed in Liverpool for 1 week. Then we got on a C-47 and flew down to Dijon in France with the 320th Bomb Group, which was a B-26 bomb group. And we want me to stop anywhere and ask any questions. So we were there a while, and they told us they were going to send you down to near Marseille in France for a little bit more training. So we went down there for about a month or two. Then we went back to Dijon, and I was a radio mechanic, technician, or whatever you want to call it, on the flight line. Every time they flew a mission, I'd go from plane to plane and test the radio equipment while the mechanics were testing the engines. And then they'd go on the missions and come back. And that was in February 1945, just 4 months before the war ended. So I was there until the war ended. And then they put us in trucks after the war ended, took us to Nuremberg, Germany. And we stayed there a while. They put us in houses, made the people move out, and we moved in their houses. A lot of them had gardens in their backyard, and they'd come back and work those gardens. Well, we were living in their houses. So then they decided they were going to send us to the Far East. And they said we were going down to Marseille in France, get on board a ship, go through the Suez Canal and the Indian Ocean, somewhere in the Far East. We didn't know where. So we were there getting shots for all the diseases they got in the Far East. And that's when they dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. And so they changed their mind then about sending us to the Far East. Because that ended the war, you know, with Japan. So we turned around, went back to Germany. Stayed there a while. And then they decided to send us back to France. So we went back to a place called San Quentin in France. Stayed there a couple of months. So we were living in tents. So one day, they sent word down to a fellow in my group that they were going to transfer him out down to Munich, Germany. And he didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave his buddies. So I had a new wife at home, and I was hoping maybe they'd be sending me home. So I told him, I said, I'll tell you what, if you don't want to go, let's go see the commander, and I'll go. So we did, and I had the same credentials he had. So he said, yeah, it's all right for you to go. So we went, he gave me a driver and took me all the way back to Munich. And when I got there, they found out the group was packing up to go to Marseille, get on a ship, and go to the Far East. And we stayed there for a while. And they changed their mind again and sent us back to Germany. I can't remember the name of the place now, but we stayed there a year. And the war was over by that time. So they told me they had sent so many people home they needed a radio man on a B-26. So I said, well, I'll take the job. I'd get flight pay, you know. So till I went home, I was on that B-26, and we were doing all kind of odd jobs. They'd send us to the maintenance base, have work done, took people to rest camp, took us down to Italy, got a load of wine for the officers club. So we did all kind of stuff like that until I got ready finally to come home in April 1945.
You were telling me yesterday about they sent you on a honeymoon with a sergeant.
Oh yeah, while I was flying that airplane, the commander told us one day, I want you fellas to fly down to Mannheim tomorrow, be there at noon. A major's getting married to a Red Cross girl, and we're going to have you fly them on their honeymoon down to Riviera. So we went down to Mannheim, a few miles out of Mannheim. And after a while, we heard the bridal party coming. They were in a general's car, flying the general's flag. and had MP escort. I thought to myself, these are important people. They got on the plane, went down to the runway to take off, and the bride said, "Oh, I forgot my pocketbook. It's in Mannheim. I've got to have my pocketbook." So we had to turn around and take her back, and they took her back to Mannheim, got her pocketbook. When she got back, we flew down to the Riviera. We got to stay down there a couple of days. And well, that was during that time I was there.
Yeah, and they flew them back home after the honeymoon, eh?
Yeah, I flew them back home. We got to stay a couple of days.
Now, when did you get married to Louise? Was that
I met Louise in June 1944, and we dated a while. And so I went on down to teach radar school in Boca Raton, Florida. And I told her, I said, now we can get married because I get 2 weeks vacation after I get out of radar school. And then I'm going overseas. So that's when we got married. We went to Dayton, Ohio, and her brother was a preacher there, and he married us. Yeah.
So you didn't know her? You met her when you were in the military?
I met her while I was in the military.
At one of the bases?
At Grand Tool, Illinois, going to electronics school.
Okay, y'all had a night off sometime and you met her at church
Well, it was
somewhere?
on the weekend. I didn't get any nights off.
Okay.
Just the weekends. I'd hitchhike over to Bloomington where she was.
Just met, how'd you meet her? You remember?
My bunkmate at Grand Tool told me, he said, I got a date in Bloomington this weekend. He said, how about come go with me? I'll get my girl to get you a date. I didn't want to go. I said, no, I don't want to go. And so we went over to Bloomington, and he went to his girlfriend's house, and something happened. She couldn't go out. So we were left stranded. So we were fooling around town, decided to go in this grill, and these 2 girls were coming out. One of them was Louise. So we stopped and talked to them, and that's where the story started.
And how many years were y'all married before she passed away last month?
72 years.
72 years, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
That is okay.
So that's about the whole story.
But, so 1946 is when you were
I got back home in 1946. I was in the Army occupation for about a year, and got home in April of 46.
how'd y'all decide to be on Florence? Was it where was Louise? I know you
She
came
was
from
working in Aurora, Illinois at the time. And so she had to leave that job, and we went to Florence.
Is that because the railroad job you got here?
Went back to the railroad job.
Now you were working with the Seaboard Coastline when you
Yeah.
were enlisted. That was your the job you were getting deferred on.
Yeah.
Hugh Merriman was also a railroad
Yeah, he was, yeah.
guy, but he went into the Army, I think, and not the Air Force when he
Yeah.
as a logistics guy. But that's interesting. Well, thank you for your service, and so you never. It's amazing to me how much training that you guys, receive years of training before you actually getting over there, and by the time you finished all your training, the war was ending.
It was about 4 months each place.
Yeah. Andrew, you got any other questions?
So were the Nuremberg trials, had they begun yet when you were there?
Pardon?
The Nuremberg trials?
They were.
They were.
And I had an opportunity to go and didn't do it.
Wow.
Fell in my room where I was stationed. He went. And I wish now I had gone. I had a chance to go to Switzerland, and I was afraid they might ship home while I was down there. So I didn't go.
Did you realize the importance of the Nuremberg trials while you were there?
I
Did you?
doubt it. Well, I knew all about them, but I
Probably knew some of the big name
Yeah,
guys that were on trial, but
I wish I had gone.
what was the reception of the people that you were put in their homes in?
Well, you know they didn't
They
like
came
it.
right. I mean, did they?
But they took it pretty good. What else could they do?
Yeah. I mean, they came back and worked their gardens while you were there.
Yeah.
Did you get to share of any of the food? I'm sure that was good.
Guess what?
Did you get to share in any of the food from the garden?
You know, one time we went deer hunting, and food was hard to get over there.
That's what I was thinking.
And so we had this couple, older German couple, that we doing our washing for us, our clothes. And we went to them and told them, said, if you'll fix us a supper, we'll give you the rest of the meat. So they did. And we went around and had supper and gave them the rest of the meat.
Did you see a lot of? I know a lot of the German soldiers, maybe even especially the SS guys, that after the war they hid their uniforms and tried to distance themselves from certain parts of the German army. Did you see any of that while you were there?
Well, I didn't see any of that, no. I didn't know who was the SS
Well,
and who wasn't.
yeah, that's what their plan was, to try to distance themselves from what they had done.
Yeah. I remember the place I stayed the longest. They had a lot of civilians and they working in the mess room and the serving line. And most of them were displaced workers from other parts of Europe. And we used to kid them and say, you know, I hear they're going to send you all to Russia. And they'd throw up there, no. They didn't want to go.
Was Russia ever mentioned in part of your training, that they might be who our next adversary would be?
Well, I think I did hear some things like that. A lot of people said we'll be fighting them next.
Well, that's a good thing we didn't, I guess, man.
Well, good story, Bill. Thank you for sharing it with us. And Andrew, any other questions on you? You got them all answered?
I reckon so. Thank you for telling us your story
Thank you very much.
and your service.
All right. Well, great, Bill.